Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another great webinar here with Gable. Today, we're going to talk about the learnings from Dropbox's virtual first workplace and people strategy. Very excited for everyone to join here. Well, everyone trickling in, let's get to know each other. Please write in the chat your name, your role, the company you're at, and also where you're joining in from. We usually have people all around the world, so it's quite exciting to see. Also, just a little bit about Gable. For those of you who don't know, we are the workplace operating system. We're a fully integrated solution for seamless hybrid, remote, and in-office management. We have 4 key pillars of our platform. The first is on-demand access to over 13,000 co-working spaces globally. The second would be event orchestration, helping companies manage on-sites and off-sites for their team. For your in-office experience, meeting room booking, desk reservation, and of course, visitor management to welcome visitors and guests. And without further ado, also wanted to highlight that we will have a Q&A session at the end. So please join here so you can scan the QR code or just type in the link to slido.com and this code. You'll already see that there are quite a lot of questions there. You can upvote and add additional questions as well. And now for our incredible speakers, I would love for you to introduce yourselves. Alison, would like if you can start, and Chandler, you can follow, would be great.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Bent, and I am a VP of People Operations at Dropbox, where I lead a few teams dedicated to employee and workplace experience. I have been at Dropbox actually for 7 years, coming up on this May, which is a very long time. And I'm based out of the Bay Area. I live in San Francisco.
And hi, everybody. My name is Chandler Bonney, and I lead the real estate team here at Dropbox. Been here about 6 years, so have seen everything from in office 3 meals a day to now a virtual first company. Started my career in design and architecture. Originally came to Dropbox just to lead the design and construction piece, and has evolved over time. So all things real estate now. And I live in San Diego, but happen to be in our San Francisco studio right now. So mixing it up in this virtual first world.
Incredible. Great. So now we're going to talk a little bit about virtual first. And my first question to both of you would be, why did you even start and thought about moving to a virtual first format? What goals did you have initially when you thought about the idea?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, I think Chandler mentioned this in her intro, but prior to the pandemic, we were very in-office culture and company. We're actually 97% of our employees were aligned to an office locations. We only had 3% of our employees that were remote. At Dropbox, we did start to consider, more flexible work. I would say in the year or so leading up to when the pandemic hit, because we did feel like it was very important to, look at unlocking great talent pools that existed outside of the places that we were, recruiting from. But certainly once the pandemic hit, it really accelerated the shift to more flexible and distributed work. And it really became clear to us at Dropbox that the traditional ways of working were really changing and we weren't going back. And so our mission as a company is also to design a more enlightened way of working. And so, for us, we saw this as a really unique opportunity to completely reimagine how and where we worked. And for us, that meant a total redesign of not just, our kind of how we were thinking about things from a people perspective, but how we were thinking about our workspaces, our technology, our operations. And it was really just a really kind of transformative undertaking for us. It started as an HR-led project, but very quickly became clear we needed to take a very cross-functional approach. Chandler and I worked really closely on the initial launch to that as well, because I think, and the reason why I think virtual first is still working really well for us is because we did take a really comprehensive approach to redesigning what work looked like.
And I'll just add to that too, not just real estate and people team, but taking everyone into account, that what this has for tax implications, for legal rights, for everybody across the company. So this was truly a big cross-functional effort. And the other thing I'll just touch on that Allison mentioned was about like how we were fully in office and how many people tied culture to space and didn't tie culture to the company or the way teams were now working that weren't co-located, but their community is now their new Dropbox culture, their Dropbox community. So we really saw that shift too, which has been an interesting journey as well.
Incredible. And we see this as well, that basically people come just not for the space now, they come for the people. So it's a really big shift. It's really inspiring how you've done this. So Virtual First has been around for a few years now. Would be curious to hear how this evolved throughout the years.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, from an office perspective, we were very in office. We took the small baby steps of not to rock the boat too much. We had 18 offices. What are we going to do for those employees that are co-located, even though it's, 6 people in Singapore? Slowly, and not really that slowly, over time, we started seeing, well, we now have 50 employees in Los Angeles. How are we solving for that? This is no longer having to do with just cities, but these are congregations of these people in different networks. So we saw the evolution there and how we, opened up WeWork, or, we had a more flexible type of pass, sort of tiptoeing in between what we used to have and what we currently have. Um, we did just consolidate real estate footprint on picking what sites we thought we still had a good amount of employees, or ones that we felt like the travel budget wanted to get people together in these specific geographies. So maintaining some of our real estate there. I do think it's interesting. We had 18 sites, right? We're down to 3 dedicated locations, and then we have 2 small service office. But over the last year, I just pulled the data, we booked in over 250 different cities with Gable too, right? So yes, we pulled back on our real estate portfolio, our dedicated real estate portfolio, but it has really opened up the flexibility for our employees. So I think that has been great. And then obviously just looking at our utilization and optimizing our space for how we are currently using it, which is very different than 5 days a week, everybody sitting at a desk, but more team building, more social types of events. So looking at our space and how we're adapting for that was something else we've been molding over the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I would just add to, I think, definitely our approach to workspaces has evolved a lot. A lot of, our kind of principles around Virtual First haven't changed a lot since we launched, because we spent a lot of time really being thoughtful about the design in terms of leveraging, like an asynchronous by default mindset, core collaboration hours, how we approach meetings. I mean, we certainly learned and iterated a lot on those things. But I would say another big kind of evolution that we had was like, what does community building look like in this new way of working? And now that we have so many distributed teams, right? And so I think something that we learned was also there's a couple of things. I think number one was, what does community building look like now in this new way of working? And so we did see employees from Dropbox start to cluster in cities where we never had presence before. Think cities like Denver or Portland. We also started to see some insights around like, hey, we really want to get together with other individuals. We also are not, we want to do it in service of the work too. And so we started to think about what would this kind of look like? And so we launched a program called Dropbox Neighborhoods, where it's about local community building. We, do some work kind of facilitating what those communities can look like. We have community builders in those locations, and we've launched like an employee-led kind of community building program. But Gable and our on-demand spaces play a critical role in that, because that means our employees in Chicago can get together to watch an all hands, and then they can all get together socially after that, right? So it's also something that I think having a lot of that flexibility has enabled us to really kind of reimagine what community looks like in this way of working too.
Yeah, and I think it ties really well to what you've both described at the beginning, how both people and workplace work together. And, you know, there is the component of we're building a community, but where we're also building how the space serve that community and the intentionality around it, which is really exciting to hear. And Alison, you already touched a little bit about, you know, the guiding principles of virtual first, that haven't really changed, but still, and you've done a lot of work on defining those, that they seem to span across people's spaces, but also the company culture as a whole. If you can talk a little bit about that, would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, just at a high level, when we talk about virtual first, it means that we work primarily remotely. We, we really kind of have tried to think about how we work, right, versus where. So, so we work primarily remotely, but we do prioritize the in-person element because it is so critical, and we really believe that there's no substitute, right, for human connection. So that means our teams get together about once per quarter in person, and a lot of virtual first too is really anchored in this idea that flexibility is really the ultimate currency in modern work. We've seen such a shift around that. And virtual first is also really around giving that flexibility to our employees, to give them the autonomy to best, to kind of adapt their working styles around what will best work for them. So but we also had to create some central frameworks and ways of working and practices that all of us would kind of adhere to, because we all work so cross-functionally, right? So I mentioned async by default. Asynchronous by default is sort of the mindset that we try to operate with, and that influences how we communicate, how we approach knowledge management as well. We leverage core collaboration hours, which are 4-hour time blocks by region, in which we're available for synchronous collaboration meetings, but also like, slacking or responding to docs in real time. We leverage AI-powered tools to help us work faster and more effectively. We implement meeting hygiene, like trying to leverage meetings for the 3Ds, discussion, debate, and decision-making, and then save everything else for more asynchronous. So there's like a couple of different, I think, elements for us that have been, I think really key. And I do think, and again, the in-person connection and collaboration still continues to be, just such a cornerstone of how we work in virtual first too, because we really find it gives teams the foundation of trust building that they need in order to then go back to working virtually with speed and very effectively as well.
Incredible. And I think you mentioned a lot of things and a lot of elements, and I would say that probably can go many directions. How did you decide on those specific components to be those pillars?
I think it came through a lot of our research, right? So in the design, in the design process, we really looked at things like companies that had instituted remote work policies and then reversed them, right? We looked also at companies that have been operating really successfully with a remote first mindset, and really tried to learn from them. So we really tried to take this kind of like first principles approach. We also looked at some of our own internal research to do that. But I think, like, especially when we looked at things like tools and communication and processes, I think, again, it's that really was that discovery mode. I also, as part of that, like, sort of discovery phase that we did and all of that research, we identified, I think, a number of mindset shifts that we needed to make in order to be successful, because I mentioned we were very in-office culture kind of before. And so we needed to actually say, hey, we need to go from this culture of all-day syncs to an asynchronous by default mindset, or go from this notion transition of busyness and being busy all day to focusing on impact, right? And so we leverage these kind of mindset shifts to really identify for us where we needed to focus. So for example, async by default mindset for us to really do that effectively. It meant we really needed to have a dedicated focus on revamping our knowledge management so that we could, be able to work effectively in a distributed way. And, other kinds of updates that we also have made to things like our tools, communication processes. We take a very data-driven approach. We really try to approach virtual first, like how we build our products. We build, we learn, we iterate, we kind of redo them. We kind of constantly iterating. So for example, like an insight that we've gathered in recent, over the last year is like, we really need to do a better job of protecting focus time for our employees. We are experimenting right now with leveraging one of our own products, Reclaim.ai, which is like a smart scheduling tool to help better protect our focus time. So that's just like one example of how we're kind of constantly like iterating even on the specific components, but we still come back, like spending that time in discovery and such extensive time in discovery was so important for us to develop these key principles that we still really adhere to.
I also want to add, when we first launched this, it was all about keeping the learning mindset from a change management perspective, allowing yourself to change your mind in front of your employees that, hey, we're going to treat this like our product. We're going to try this out. It may or may not work. And then we're going to keep iterating on it. And we're going to keep this learning mindset. Give us your feedback. Let's figure this out. So I think that was really helpful from the very beginning on from a change management perspective, not just for real estate. I think that's like the tangible thing that people can grasp onto, like, oh my gosh, we don't have 3 meals a day anymore. But with all the tech and tools, that is actually the root and the most important part of operating effectively virtually. Keeping that learning mindset really helped us with our employees get through it too.
And I think it also resonates with employees, being open and saying we are learning, we're in this together, and we want your feedback, because at the end of the day, the employees are your customers. So it's very much aligned in that sense. And you both touch about gatherings, and I want to talk about this as well, because this is something that is top of mind with almost every leader that we talk to. Is how did you create the programming of gatherings and intentional gatherings? And Alison, you touched a little bit about the quarterly gatherings and have community builders in different locations. So curious to hear about that, and also how they're different from what you've started with or what you've had before.
Yeah. So I mean, I think again, focus on human connection is something that was very important to us, like as part of this designing this model. And so we did make some assumptions. I think early on we thought once per quarter would actually be what made sense with us, but again, we kind of needed to start somewhere. So we kind of started with that, but we've actually found that cadence still really works for us. And so we have essentially, and this has really evolved over time too, but that we've really been able to kind of narrow in on the specific way in which you gather helps you deliver different kinds of business outcomes. And that's something that we've really learned a lot over these last couple of years. And so what we see is we really have 3 main forms of gathering. So you can see them outlined here on the slide, but traditional offsite. So think of those as like your traditional kinds of like programming, some team building. We find these are great for, strategy planning combined with some team building as well. Then we do kind of retreat style offsites, which are, we have a new leader coming in. We really need to be in a distraction-free kind of situation and really build trust and get to know each other deeper, improve communication as a team. And then we've certainly seen a need for more co-working style gatherings too. So we have an immediate deliverable coming up. We're working on a product launch. We just need to get together and co-work, not a lot of programming and things like that. And so we've been able to really see I think some really significant kinds of business outcomes from the way in which you gather. We've also really been able to kind of now start to experiment more with the kind of experiences and content that you do to help better kind of deliver on those gatherings as well. But this does mean we, you know, provide a pool of money to our teams to gather on a quarterly basis. And again, I mentioned that, you know, we've really found, I think that cadence of 3 to 5 times per year actually really works for our teams. We find actually when teams are meeting a little bit less than that or a little bit more than that, there is actually a significant impact on employee and team health kind of metrics. So it has shown us that cadence really is what works for us. We also do, and I mentioned this briefly before, but we do have other ways in which we gather, like our neighborhoods program, and we have the community-led neighborhood program there. We invest a lot in our ERG programming, and so that certainly shows up in our neighborhoods as well. And we really had to reimagine kind of our support around gatherings over the last couple of years. So we've you know, developed an offsite planning team. We have also open sourced all of those materials that our offsite planning team uses to all of our teams if they want to self-plan. So we created like an offsite in a box. We use calendars to look at when employees or teams are gathering in certain locations, so people can try to align offsites together to get more cross-functional alignment. Or, oh, I can see so-and-so is coming to my city, like, let me make sure I get together and get a coffee chat with them. But it definitely has also very much influenced how we think about our spaces. And so I'm sure, Chandler, you have things to add here.
Yeah, I think the evolution, or like what we're seeing now for the impacts on real estate, is like scaling for this demand. Allison mentioned, you know, teams are getting together quarterly, sort of at a minimum, right? There's certain teams that get together a little bit more, maybe a sales team or you know, an engineering team getting together for a hacking project and working on that. So there are definite needs for these may be more frequent, but what we're seeing is, how do you adapt the real estate for these sort of surges of use? How are we, you know, keeping our dedicated portfolio that it is a curated experience, that people are coming in, that they can leave their bag and walk away from their laptop and feel comfortable. We have, you know, security and baristas. But if there's 400 people, do we need extra security and extra baristas and janitorial? And how are we planning for those surges? I think, given the nature of sort of these pre-planned on-site offsites, you know, whether they're in a studio or offsite somewhere else, the nature of the pre-planned is that you can see, oh, Allison's team's going to be in New York next week. I'm actually going to be there too, and like let me meet up with them. But that also gives us on the real estate team some warning that maybe a group of 300 is going to come into San Francisco, and they're all going to be dropped off at a bus at 7:30, and they're all going to want coffee. So how are we planning for that? So I think this idea of like scaling for demand, and also remembering employees aren't coming in that frequently, right? So treating it more like a hotel, wayfinding, where do I go? How do I get in? What is the badge situation? How am I like treating maybe these mundane tasks that I would have just accepted as normal in a office, like a 5 day a week office environment? How am I emphasizing the hospitality and giving our employees more direction from the start? It's just a shift that we're seeing on the focus of hospitality in the workplace to guide people through their stay that happens to be our office.
Amazing. And I think, you know, as a follow-up to that, we have the program, and we have basically all of these gathering styles. And I'm curious, and obviously, Chandler, you mentioned the real estate reduction, but I'm curious if you can share a little bit on the results. So 2 questions. First is, what data have you been measuring and collecting? And then how does it tie to business outcomes?
Yeah, so we have definitely been tracking utilization across the board, how people are using anything everywhere, just like we're also tracking how effective our employees are with some of the tools we're rolling out. Or I know Allison's team's looking at the core collaboration. Are those the right 4 hours a day that people are working on? from a real estate perspective, for sure. Looking at how many people are using the space, how are they using the space, and then from an ROI perspective, and satisfaction, are people feeling satisfied with the spaces that we're giving from, a dedicated space versus maybe a hotel meeting room? Like, is there a difference in maybe some of the satisfaction there? I think the TLDR to that is like, we have seen for multiple years in a row that people do feel great getting together with their team. And from a social perspective, if you're really honing in on the real estate, thinking about security and thinking about how comfortable people are in a space has come back as feedback for us. So we are definitely taking that to heart. Like, it doesn't mean we're just going to give up all of our dedicated space, because it is still an employee sentiment that is important to our employees. It's just not as many dedicated spaces. So I think that is one thing. Also, just looking at how people are using the space. When Allison and I first started this and we were thinking about how we should like revamp our space a little bit, we're like, oh, everyone's just going to come in for big meetings and that's it and leave, right? And we're really seeing this shift to teams coming in and just working alongside each other, both in our studios and then also at Gable Spaces too. So they might, get a cluster of desk bookings, or they might take off, a corner of our space here that has desks because they want to just sit down and like work through a problem. That is just as effective as a meeting room. And I would say, like, Allison and I, we probably wrongly assumed that everyone was going to come in for a classroom. Everyone also hangs out in our coffee shop a lot, so much so that I was considering, like, should we pop up just coffee shops? Like, do we even, we can supplement boardrooms as needed. Maybe we just start building coffee shops. So I think looking at that, looking at food and beverage program, and like, ultimately flexibility is still most important. At first it was like, oh my gosh, you're getting rid of our huge food program, but now we have some grab and go salads, some snacks, and a barista, and honestly it's great. Everyone's satisfied with that. So that was another thing that we were very nervous about, on like, oh gosh, how is this going to go over? But back to the culture piece, culture is not the food and beverage that you're offering. It's like how you're getting your teams together. And then from a workplace design perspective, sort of implementing some of these changes and keeping a learning mindset, letting people know, hey, we're going to experiment. We're going to like trade out some furniture and see if this works better, if more people use it, or if like people don't feel comfortable taking a Zoom meeting in an open space. Maybe we just don't need, Zoom cards anymore. So something else that we're just thinking from a space perspective that has evolved over time.
Yeah, and I think so what the slide that's up here, actually, we did release a year in review recently on our blog. So you can check that out if you'd like to see some of our key learnings from this last year. And this is 2024, but I do think, we've seen a really significant impact in terms of virtual first on things like talent attraction, engagement, retention, right? So we've seen our ESATs, our employee satisfaction, move to the highest it's been. We saw 6 people rating success in virtual first, jumping actually 40 points over the last several years. We have seen our offer accept rates increase. We've seen our job applications increase, with getting even more competitive in terms of the talent that we've been able to bring in. And when we look at our internal employees too, we see 90% of our employees rate satisfaction with working in virtual first, with their ability to choose when and where they work. Nearly 80% of Dropboxers like report feeling productive in their current role. High scores around innovation and fostering inclusion. So we're really proud of, the results and that we've seen, both in terms of talent attraction, retention, engagement. And you can see all of this too. These were some of the key things that we kind of looked at this year, just kind of like a by the numbers, but also, how the impact of some of our work, for example, around meeting effectiveness and all of that. So we really do try to take a very data-driven approach. I mentioned we build this like we build our products, so we have to use our data and our insights to inform what we're doing. We typically look at like kind of triangulating insights across a lot of different data sources, because there's no like sort of smoking gun, like this is the one metric that tells us if we're successful in virtual first. So we try to take a really comprehensive role. And again, Chandler looks at a whole set of metrics around real estate and utilization. We certainly are obviously looking at that from an overall picture as well. But we also leverage data from ITS. We use data from pilots. Like there's sort of all sorts of things that we're constantly kind of looking at and measuring, so that we can really embody that sort of learning mindset in virtual first.
And just to highlight that, I think it's so incredible that you've taken a proactive approach at the end of the day. A lot of companies are struggling with, what is this new way of working really means. And there are companies that are virtual first, there are companies that are hybrid, there are companies that are in office, but there is a spectrum basically that each company is now trying to figure out. And the common thread, I think, is being proactive and being curious, which has been, the numbers speak for themselves and just pay so much dividends. One last thing that I would love for you to cover is, again, a little bit more on the gatherings and the focus on the collaborative piece, which has been such a key aspect. If you can talk a little bit about the results here, would be great.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we see gathering, just overall being actually the top driver of belonging for us at Dropbox, which is really significant. We also see their, gathering actually really does have such a meaningful impact on teams working effectively together. 86% see a change in team effectiveness after a gathering in person. We also, you can see some of the stats here too. Some of these are around, because we did start experimenting with this offsite planning team. We launched that last year. So we see, high rates of satisfaction in terms of employees not only engaging with the offsite planning team services, but also maybe just the materials, right, to help plan offsites. It's such precious time together. So we want to make sure it really is as effective as possible. And then, and again, depending on, and we certainly look at the difference in, modality too, in terms of what different modalities are, driving different kinds of outcomes, for example, around trust. We do see, again, and you can see kind of all of these impacts here, reporting stronger team connection after getting together. So this has just shown us we will continue to invest in this area, because it's so important for so many different dimensions of the employee experience and team effectiveness for us.
Excellent. And you've iterated, and the results are showing as well, which is that's to your point, as we will we'll continue doing what works well, which is amazing. I want to open this up for questions from our audience. We've submitted quite a lot, as you can see here. So we'll start with the order of upvotes. We'll start. I think this will be a good start for Chandler. What was the total cost saving from consolidated real estate footprint?
Everyone always wants to know the total cost savings here. We've definitely had some savings in real estate. I think to Allison's point earlier, we've reallocated spend in T&E, and like knowing that teams are no longer co-located and traveling. So I think that's important to note. I also think it's really important to note that we still have a pretty significant obligation, and not fully recovering the obligation when we are able to sublease spaces. So while virtual first, it has been really great for our company, that cost wasn't the overwhelming desire to begin with. That was a slam dunk, let's call it that. Just given the the sublease market and what that looks like. We have assets in very large cities like Seattle and San Francisco. We still have a few 100,000 square feet available here that we're paying rent on. So yes, there has been some savings, but there also has been quite a significant reallocation. And then we're also taking on the job of landlord too. So that's just been a pivot in our real estate team. I don't have a solid number to give you here, but I do. I'm happy if anyone wants to reach out to me and chat through like options or how people are trying to think about this for your own company. Please do so.
Oh, I think you're muted, please.
I think you came off.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say thank you, Chandler. I really like the follow question here. What would you do differently if you were to embark on a project like this again?
What would we do
Yes.
differently?
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead, Elsa.
yeah, I mean, I do think we, took a pretty thoughtful and, measured approach in terms of engaging with, lots of folks internally. So I think though, one area that certainly Chandler and I have worked a lot on together is the right kind of support model for, virtual first to be successful. We've done a reorg, we've thought through just how things have adjusted and evolved. Like I might have gone back, maybe Chandler and I probably would have gone back and been like, let's map out maybe a bit of a roadmap for how this would look potentially, just so we could have something to kind of refer back to. I think we assumed we might make some changes, but didn't really get into that, and that might have been helpful. So that's something, yeah, just like sort of the org design piece to get ahead of it a little bit. But Chandler, what about you?
Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but to your point, Allison, it's like we tried to keep like some status quo, so it wasn't we were still concerned about change management going from like what felt like a very significant shift. I do feel very grateful that we made a decision early. We were able to get rid of space on our from a real estate perspective. October 2020, as soon as we announced we were going to virtual first, that's when our marketing material went out for sublease space. So I do feel grateful that getting stuff on the market as soon as we could was great. I think one thing I would change was like maybe not caring less about change management, but we were thoughtful of it, which it made us take a few more baby steps than sort of ripping the Band-Aid off, which we felt like we were doing anyway. But maybe that was one thing, baby stepping from like, well, let's just make sure everybody in all of these cities continue to have a space versus just totally remapping the program of how we saw it, 3 years from then. So yeah, agree with Allison there.
Awesome. Another question, which is, it is a lot of what we hear as an interesting thought is, how much of a virtual team building plays a role, and do you see the effectiveness in that? And if so, how do you stay creative in planning those events?
In virtual events?
Yeah, virtual events.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done some experimentation around this. At some point we we looked at we did an employee conference that was like an all virtual employee conference. We initially we did a lot of virtual community building, early days of virtual first. I think now, we just seen a shift, I think, in sentiment with our employees too. So we do try to facilitate, with around executive travel or when a offsite is in a certain city, kind of planning in person, sort of like community building around that. But we definitely, I mean, there's such an important part around virtual community building for sure. I mean, we definitely still do a lot of things with our ERGs. We do talks is what we call them, you know, to have virtual events around that. But I also think like what we find is like we have a number of virtual practices too that you can find on our virtual first toolkit externally. I've dropped the link in the chat actually about how to actually build, you know, do team building virtually as well. Some simple practices, things that we encourage our managers to do as well. So there's also like the sort of like what can you do within your teams to kind of activate around that. And we have, you know, again, some practices that relate to that as well. But, you know, I think it's evolved. We did a lot more early on. And again, continue to invest in it, but kind of focus more on like practices too with like teams.
I think the one virtual thing that has still remained pretty successful is our employee resource groups.
Yeah.
So having talks, you know, Women's History Month, then talking about mentorship, or you know, write a letter to a veteran, and we'll like jump on here and teach you where to send it and what to do. A lot of like cross-pollinating. So we had an astronaut come, and so who was a previous veteran. So it was like veteran and Black Dropboxers get together to host this virtual panel that people can tune into and listen to the, you know, the Q&A with the astronaut. So I do think that those are still really important and something that is like well attended from our office, so that you know, everyone around the globe can tune in to you know, something for Pride Month, or bingo, or you know, however we're doing those kind of events. So those are still, I think, pretty successful. And then to Allison's point, pulling in person for the community building within neighborhoods has been the shift.
And I think that the next question is a great follow-up to that, actually, is how do you express and fortify brand and employee experience when place is not the primary hub?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a great question. I think, you know, we really actually did really try to redefine what community and culture looked like for us in virtual first. I think, again, mentioning we were very in-office culture, 97% in office. Our offices were viewed as the place in which you build culture, but we had to kind of take a step back and redefine what that looked like, and define it as like the shared set of like beliefs and values. And we really actually did explicitly say like it's about people over places, right? And so I think number one, it was about kind of redefining what that was all about, also redefining a bit of what community building looked like in this distributed environment, hence like neighborhoods and how we've reimagined some of that. But I also think, you know, something that we've really found too is, you know, what goes hand in hand with like flexibility is also a desire for autonomy and ownership, right? And we see people who really thrive in working in this way to have a very like autonomous and owner kind of like mindset as well. And so also community building in this new environment is also giving our employees tools to be able to take ownership over community building as well. So with like Neighborhoods by Dropboxers, this program that where we actually give funding to employees to gather themselves, that we've seen a huge increase in engagement that way. So there is something about that time with like sort of personal agency and autonomy too that kind of relate to what community building looks like, in addition to sort of redefining it and facilitating then what this new kind of what community looks like in this way of working.
Thank you, Allison. We'll wrap it up with one last question that includes both data and space utilization. That again are really interesting topics. I'm sure, Chandler, you've heard this multiple times, but what kind of data is most helpful in understanding space utilization in a hybrid environment? And you touched a little bit about this before.
Yeah, I touched a little bit about it before, and I think the important thing that Allison and I are starting to dig in even more is employee sentiment. So, like, how much money are we spending, and are people happy with the experience they're getting? And are those two things matching up? And does that mean we're investing in the right spots? I think our overall data on utilization is like pretty rudimentary. I would love to employ like the Wi-Fi beacon utilization to give us a little bit more clear idea on where people are gathering. We don't have that right now. We just have badge data. But I think the big takeaway here is looking at the employee sentiment overlaid with the money you're spending. So are you spending money in the right spot that people are happy about? Or are you spending all of this money on these huge, big, elaborate events and people are leaving being like, man, I don't really feel like I talked to anyone new. So um, where that's sort of this next iteration too, of making sure that we're really honing in on making sure we're spending our money where the employee sentiment is positive.
And I also think too that like, you know, and again, just seeing again how significant the gathering experience is to delivering business outcomes. It's also like, yeah, our space is able to deliver like what our teams need, right? So for example, like we obviously partner very closely with your team on like, hey, we're seeing a big increase in co-working types of offices. What does this actually look like now? You know, in these key cities where we know we can gather, right? So it's like also ensuring that it's like we're able to do what we need to do with our spaces to deliver the kind of outcomes that we know our teams need them to.
Incredible. We're at time. Thank you, everyone who joined us. It flew by extremely fast. I hope to you all too. Thank you, Chandler and Allison, for sharing your journey. I would say in Dropbox's journey and innovation. And everyone have a great rest of your day.
Yes, thanks everybody for
Thank you.
joining.
Thank you, everyone.